Hello everyone. So today we are going to work on the axial skeleton. Now in the axial skeleton, what is included? So let's look at the skeleton. Okay, so this is a good example of your axial skeleton. It consists of, as you can see, it consists of skull, your vertebral column, your ribs, your sternum. All this makes up your axial skeleton. Of course, your mandible. And then the hyoid bone, which is not very clear over here, but let's look up another skeleton that could show you the hyoid bone more clearly. So I am kind of moving it around to see if there is a hyoid bone here somewhere, but I don't see a hyoid bone visible. Okay, let's see right here. We have, right here we have the bone, and we are going to look at that. So I'm going to get out of this. Okay, so now if you look closely, you can see in this one, right here, you see this bone? This is your hyoid bone right here. Okay, this is your hyoid bone. Hyoid bone is a bone and is present where this bone right here is the bone that is present where the head meets the neck. Okay, and we are going to look at that as well in just a bit. Okay, so looking back again, all the red is your axial skeleton and all the blue is your appendicular skeleton. Okay, so you can see the red is your axial skeleton and the blue that you are looking at, that is your appendicular skeleton. What we are going to do today is, not today, but during this test period, we are going to work on the axial skeleton. So what are we doing today? We are going to do the skull. And the skull, in that we are going to do cranial bones, and your axial skeleton, it is going to have, of course, the skull, and in the skull there will be cranial bones, facial bones. Now besides skull, your axial skeleton also has hyoid bone, ear ossicle, sternum, ribs, and the vertebrae. And that takes care of the axial skeleton. And then there are muscles, which we are going to be doing as well. All of these muscles, their origin, their insertion, and their action. Okay, so with that being said, let's see what we are doing in the frontal bone, in the cranial bones. Today we are going to do basically frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. We are going to do these 4 bones. So let's look at the frontal bone. So this is your frontal bone, and this bone in pink is your frontal bone, this pink bone. In the frontal bone, this line is your supraorbital margin. See, supraorbital margin. So we are doing the supraorbital margin, then supraorbital foramen, and the glabella. So this is supraorbital margin. This is your supraorbital foramen, this and this. So supra means above, orbital. This is the orbit. So anything above the orbit is supraorbital. So this is supraorbital margin. This is your supraorbital foramen. Foramen means a hole. So this is supraorbital foramen. This space between the 2 orbits, this space right here, this is called glabella. Okay, so this is your glabella. And that is all for your frontal bone. Now we are going to look at the parietal bone, and in the parietal bone, we are going to be looking at sagittal suture and the coronal suture. We did these sutures already, so let's quickly just look at that. This is your parietal bone. This bone right here, the yellow bone, this is the parietal bone. Now, this right here is your coronal or the frontal suture. And then this right here where the 2 parietal bones meet, this is going to be your sagittal suture. And you can see a little bit of it right here. So these 2 bones meeting on either side, meeting in the center, they are making the sagittal suture. Let's see if we can find something better. Sagittal suture. Okay, so let's look up right here. Sagittal suture. And I love this photograph. Look at that. This is a nice one. You see this right here? This is your parietal bone on right and left. This is frontal bone. And here you can see the coronal suture, and this is your sagittal suture right here. The next thing we are going to do is occipital bone. So we are done with frontal, parietal. Now we are on occipital bone. Occipital bone is going to have lambdoid suture, foramen magnum, occipital condyle, external occipital protuberance, fossa for cerebrum and cerebellum, right? So let's look at that. This right here is the occipital bone. It makes the back of the head. This right here, what you are looking at, this is your occipital bone. And this suture that you are looking here, this is your lambdoid suture. It is an inverted V-shaped suture. And look at the spelling, L-A-M-B-D. So make sure you are spelling it correctly, L-A-M-B-D-O-I-D. Spellings matter, okay? Now we are going to look on the inside of the skull, and when we open it up and look on the inside, you see this big hole. This is called foramen magnum. This is through which spinal cord passes. Right next to it, you can see towards the back this fossa, and then you can see right here this fossa. So this fossa right here is fossa for cerebellum. This is called fossa for cerebellum. It's called fossa for cerebellum. This is the place where cerebellum of the brain sits in here. And what is fossa for cerebrum? It is this green one. And this is called fossa for cerebrum. So it is the cerebrum which sits in here. Fossa means a smooth surface. Now let me show you what is cerebrum and cerebellum. Okay. So remember I showed you in the brain here, I showed you this fossa and this fossa. So remember the lower fossa right here, I called it fossa for cerebellum, and the top one I called it fossa for cerebrum. So this is cerebrum, this is cerebellum. This is at the bottom, hence it fits in the bottom fossa. Cerebrum is above it, hence it's going to be above. Cerebrum is above, cerebellum is below. So let me show you that. See, fossa for cerebellum is below and fossa for cerebrum is up. Okay, and your brain's cerebellum and cerebrum fits in it. The next thing is occipital condyles and external occipital protuberance. So on the back, you see this protuberance right here? This is external occipital protuberance. You can see it right here as well, external occipital protuberance. And this external occipital protuberance will be somewhere here. Okay, somewhere here you are going to see it. So external occipital protuberance. Let's see. Okay. You see this right here? This is external occipital protuberance right here on the back of the head. And you can see it right here too. This is where your spinal cord is going to enter or leave. Look over here. You see this part which is kind of sticking out? This is your external occipital protuberance. Okay? It's just a protuberance that sticks out. Just right here, right? Okay, and then the next thing is your occipital condyles. Occipital condyles will be on the undersurface. So you can see right here, this is your external occipital protuberance. This is your foramen magnum through which the spinal cord enters or comes out. And this right here, these are your occipital condyles that articulate with the first vertebra. See, occipital condyles are articulating with the first vertebra right here. So, what are those occipital condyles? So, let's see. There are a lot of nice photographs out there. You just need to Google. And I saw something here. There.
Hello everyone, this is João from CanHub and welcome to another anatomy tutorial where this time I'm going to be focusing on the...
I didn't mean to do that, but anyhow. You see this right here? This is occipital condyle, okay? And this is what articulates with the, here, you can see it as well. Occipital condyles, which are going to articulate. See these occipital condyles? They are going to articulate with your axis. And that is all for your occipital bone. Now we are going to look at the next, which is your temporal bone. So in the temporal bone, we are going to do squamous suture, external auditory meatus or acoustic meatus or canal. It's the same name. It's the same thing with different names. Then there is your mandibular fossa, mastoid process, styloid process. stylomastoid foramen, zygomatic arch, petrous portion, internal auditory meatus, jugular and carotid canal. Okay, so let's look at our temporal bone. So in the temporal bone, you see this line. This line is your squamous suture or squamosal suture. You see this projection of the bone, which is making part of the cheek. That is called your zygomatic process. This hole right here is your external acoustic meatus. Meatus means a canal. So this is external auditory meatus, or the hole where your ear is attached. Okay. And when you look underneath, you see these concavities right here. These concavities are basically called mandibular fossa. Okay, so these are your mandibular fossa where the mandible condyles will come and attach. See this right here? This is what I was showing in the other photograph. This is mandibular fossa in which there are these mandibular condyles. And this makes your jaw joint, which is the temporomandibular joint. So this is your what? Mandibular fossa. And if you want, you can look at another photograph as well right here. You see this? Okay, so here you can see, okay, my bad. Okay, so here you can see right here, you see this area, this is your mandibular fossa where the mandible is going to come and attach. Okay. And you can see right here, these are occipital condyles. And this right here is your mandibular fossa where the mandible comes and sits. Okay. And this is a real bone, and you can see this right here. These are occipital condyles. This right here that you are looking at, this is your mandibular fossa. This is your temporal bone, and this is the zygomatic arch right here. And I'm just looking for any nicer photographs if there are any. So coming back here, you see this protrusion. This is the mastoid process. This is your styloid process. Styloid process is like a stylus. It's like a very thin pencil right here. So this is styloid process. This is mastoid process. This is your external acoustic meatus. This is your mandibular fossa. This is your zygomatic process. This is your squamous suture. So we did squamous suture, external auditory meatus, mandibular fossa, mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic arch, stylomastoid foramen, and petrous portion of the temporal bone. Okay, so now we are going to look on the inside right here, and you see this part. This is the petrous portion of the temporal bone. Petrous portion you are going to see inside the skull. You cut the skull into half like this. You remove the top, and then you are seeing inside the skull, and you have removed the brain. And then you are going to see right here, this area is petrous portion of the temporal bone. This is where you are going to find ear ossicles. And what are those ear ossicles? Let me see if that is in your, yes, it is over here. You can see ear ossicles. Okay, so let me show you the ear ossicles as well. So what are ear ossicles? You see right here, these are ear ossicles. And how are they attached? So let me show you. This is ear ossicle. This is malleus, which is attached right here. The malleus is basically right here attached to the, here it's going to be attached to the tympanic membrane. And then from here, then this malleus is attached to the incus. Incus is attached to the stapes. Malleus is called mallet. Incus is called anvil. And stapes is like a stirrup. So these are the three bones which are the smallest bones in the body, and they are present in the ear and help us to listen. Okay, so we are done with the petrous portion, ear ossicles. Now we are going to look at stylomastoid foramen and the internal auditory meatus. So you see this hole right here on the petrous portion of the temporal bone. You see this hole? This hole is right next to the foramen magnum. So these holes are right next to the foramen magnum, and they are called these are called internal auditory meatus. It is internal because external, remember where was the external? External was right here on the outside. This was external. Remember? External, as the name suggests, is on the outside, and internal is going to be internally present on the inside of the skull. So this is internal auditory meatus, and the other one was external auditory meatus that I showed you right here, external auditory meatus. And then we have a stylomastoid foramen. So let me show you that as well, the stylomastoid foramen. So this is a hole which is present between the styloid process and the mastoid process. So this right here is the styloid process. This right here is the mastoid process. And between the two, this hole right here, that is called stylomastoid foramen. It's a very tiny hole, and it is present between the styloid process and the mastoid process. And that's how it picks the name stylomastoid foramen. Okay. Let's see if we can find a stylomastoid foramen. Okay, this you can see right here. This is the mastoid foramen. Oh, sorry, this is the mastoid process. This is the styloid process. And in between the two, you see this hole? This is stylomastoid foramen. So you can see right here, maybe not very clear. Oh, this is a nice one. Okay. So here, let's see, this is your mastoid process. This is your styloid process, and this is your stylomastoid foramen. This right here is your carotid foramen or the carotid canal. This right here. And behind it, right here, is jugular foramen. Jugular foramen looks like a little J when you look at it. And oh, this is very nice photograph. So this right here is your styloid process, mastoid, stylomastoid foramen. This is your carotid canal, just medial to it, and right behind it, this is your jugular foramen. external occipital protuberance. These are your occipital condyles. This is your mandibular fossa. This is your zygomatic process. And let's see if we covered everything. So squamous suture, external auditory meatus, mandibular fossa, mastoid, styloid, zygomatic arch, stylomastoid foramen, petrous, internal auditory meatus, petrous portion, jugular foramen, and carotid canal. So let's see if I can show you. Oh, this is a nice one. So this right here is your petrous portion of the temporal bone, and you see this hole right here on either side. This is oh, I don't want to show you that one. So let me see if there is. Oh, this one. Oh, yes. I like this. Okay. So this right here is your petrous portion of the temporal bone on the inside. And on the petrous portion, you see this tiny little hole right here, this one, and this one. This is your internal auditory meatus or internal acoustic meatus. And this is the opening for the internal ear. And that's all. Let me check if we covered everything. Squamous suture, external auditory, mandibular fossa, process, styloid process, zygomatic arch, stylomastoid foramen, petrous portion, ear ossicles, internal auditory meatus, jugular foramen, and the carotid canal. And I covered all of that. So that is all for your lab for 4 bones of the skull. So with that being said, I am going to stop the recording and we are done. I hope this is helpful. Bye for now.